everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Victoria here.
Shadoe here.
We thought in between season one and season two, we would do a little check in and debrief with each other and with you, the listeners, um, to see how this experiment's going.
I think it's a great idea.
How is the experiment of Let's Relieve Regret? That's how this all started. We decided we wanted to see what would happen, if it would change our lives, if it would send a message to our subconscious brain by being in the practice of doing this, the same way being in the practice of working out changes our bodies, getting into the practice of eating healthy changes our guts, getting into a meditation practice can help with our conflict resolution skills and things like that. So that's the experiment of the podcast. So Shadoe and I are just going to have an open conversation today about how we think it's going.
Yeah, for sure.
So I thought maybe we'd start with regrets. Any regrets, Shadoe?
From season one.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, lots. I mean, I think to do anything, I guess with courage means you're going to have regrets following it. I know a lot of people are all about the live life, no regrets, but I don't know, that's not my style at all.
That's not my style either.
So a lot of my regrets just come down to the producing of the podcast, and I'm both. It's so funny because part of my regrets are we took too long to do certain things, and then part of my regrets are we didn't wait long enough. So it's I feel like a huge hypocrite, but that's where I'm at.
It's interesting for those of you that have listened to all of our episodes. Many ways, Shadoe, you and I are like two sides of the same coin. In many ways, we're similar. I feel the same way. So.
Right.
I think we took, I don't know, maybe I'm just a neutral person sometimes, or I'm learning how to do that, or maybe that's what this experiment's doing for me, or my life coaching's doing for me. I don't know. But yeah, I think we took a really long time to do it. It took us a year to make the first season. Everybody out there, it took us a year. And for me, I regret taking that long because I think there was a lot of fear in putting it out there. What if people don't like it? What if it doesn't help anybody? What if, I mean, we're also being very vulnerable and putting out our true real life stories. None of this is made up. What if I tell a story and somebody recognizes that they're in the story and it hurts their feelings, or all of those sorts of things, right? But I think for me, that's why it took so long for us to get it out there. And it was also the fear of literally not knowing what the F we were doing. We were doing this all on our own. We don't have a team. I had to learn how to edit. We had to figure out which microphones to get and how to do it and which software to use. And there was a lot of research involved for the first season. But on the other side of the coin, you're saying parts of it were good that we took so long. So what parts of it do you think are good that we took so long?
I think it was appropriate that we did do some brand homework. We learned about the power of colors and things like that, and just a consistent image and stuff. And we went back and forth on a lot of that stuff. But now I kind of see how it all comes together and it looks really slick. But I still wish we had spent even more time on it, even more time coming up with the social media strategy and not just putting the episodes out there. I tried reels and I'm not very good at it. I don't know if it's that I'm older or whatever, but I wish I would have spent more time learning how those things work instead of just trying stuff and throwing it out there. But then at the same time, we took so long to get it out there that once it was out there and it was actually something that we could see and touch and it was tactile, it was so much better than just this, oh no,
idea.
It was, we had the idea, we had the episodes recorded, now we had all this other pieces to fit in, and none of them were necessary, but I both wish we did more work on it and less work. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's like we over
Right.
prepared, but maybe we over prepared on the wrong things, which is like a really good lesson for small
Mm-hmm.
business owners or people starting a small business or starting a project is what do you prioritize in over preparing and when do you be this is the thing that
No,
Shadoe and
no, no,
I
no.
think not fight about in the background, everybody, but we don't fight about it. But I'm always pushing, like, let's stop preparing, let's
Mm-hmm.
be perfectly imperfect, and let's just get something out there. And then Shadoe always thinks of something that I didn't think of because I'm so excited about getting stuff out there. And Shadow's like, but we need to prepare
Yeah.
this, this, and this. And I'm like, but we don't have to be perfect. Let's just like do it. So those are like the discussions that Shadoe and
Yeah.
I that we have in the when we're not recording that you guys listeners aren't hearing. But how do you find the balance
Mm-hmm.
between that? And I think that's the lesson for us from the first season is finding the balance and then learning what to focus on. We did a lot of focusing on branding and thinking that we would pay a lot of attention to social media. And really the most exciting part for
Right.
me was getting the podcast up there because it's so great to have them out there. And when I'm editing them, I'm just every time I listen to our conversations, like, this is a great conversation. I'm so proud of us. Like, I
Right.
was like, I think this is going to help people. I think it's going to change the world. Even
Mm-hmm.
if like one person hears this that can relate to it, like, this is awesome. We have to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Oh, and
I
I
don't
didn't want
want
to
to
focus
focus
on
on
it either, but I,
Instagram.
I actually want to bring it back to you talking about the fear of it and how, like, even through this experiment, through all the other therapies I'm doing, I do wonder if some of my regrets about like not having the perfect marketing plan, not doing this part, not doing that part, are just like not they're a little bit defense mechanism if that's a word. Like, it's a little bit of like, oh, I don't regret sharing my vulnerable stories, I just regret not sharing it in a real friendly format. So I can kind of like say like, oh, that's what I don't like about it, not that any of the content made me uncomfortable, just the production of it, like I didn't wrap it in a nice enough bow or whatever.
Are you, how is that a coping? Can you go a little deeper into that? How is that like a coping thing? Is it like you need to have something to say,
No,
well,
what
it's
I'm
not
thinking
perfect
is
enough
not, it's not about
because
that. It's not about it not being perfect enough. It's about, I can, like, it's easier for me to digest the idea that I didn't do a great job at marketing it than the fact that the product itself isn't great. Like, oh, I do too. But like, if
I
there's
think the
anything
product's
not
great.
working about it,
Oh, okay.
I feel like it's easier to say, well, that's because of the algorithm, or that's because I didn't do enough social media. Or,
Oh,
yeah,
to put the
yeah, I
blame
think
on
that's
an
what's happening.
outside
Like, if I'm
source?
really
Is that what
honest
you
about
mean?
it, it's like, I don't actually care that we only have however many followers or whatever, or that we, didn't go viral or have like a really good episode that everyone loved. Like that, yeah, like I feel like if I can blame the production and not the product, then I feel less guilty about it, I guess. That's what I mean by, if I have to, oh yeah, 100%.
Do you do that in life?
Um,
Can you give me
even,
a life
okay,
example?
I have someone who wants to come over this evening, and I kind of want to tell her not to come over because the apartment isn't clean enough. But I just told her it's fine, and I'll just like be like, it's messy. But like,
So what's the judgment there? Is it that you don't want to spend time with this person, or is the judgment you're judging yourself because the
no, the
apartment's
apartment
not
is
messy and
messy,
therefore you're
and
not
we
a good
have
host and
this to
not
do
like
today.
what's the judgment?
So like, it's going to be a big challenge for me to let this person in this evening, even though we're really good friends. And like,
But why is it a challenge?
yeah,
Because you think
yeah,
that
and I
person
feel
expects
bad.
your apartment to be
No,
clean?
but like, I feel bad about it.
Do
And if
they?
I, what it
But
says
you
about
do.
me is
So what
that
does it
like,
say about you
if I
though?
can always say like, oh, don't come over, my apartment's not clean, then I'm not saying don't come over, I don't want to
Yeah.
see you. Don't come over, I don't,
Oh.
Yeah.
So you're not hurting the person's feelings
Yeah.
by saying, I don't
Yeah.
want to
And
sue
I
you.
do
You
that kind
have
of
an
stuff all the
outside
time.
source
Like I
to
always
use as
find
an
a way to be
excuse.
like, instead of having a conversation about the actual problem, yeah, so that's what I mean. I'm trying to be
Okay.
I'm trying to be more honest about that.
It's
so
an
like
avoidance technique.
even just right now in this moment, I'm figuring out
Yeah.
that all my regrets, not all of them, but some of my regrets about the production value of it are that I feel bad about the quality of the product and not the marketing. But I want to blame the marketing so that I don't feel bad, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Because I always ask curious questions. The
Yeah.
quality of the product in terms of what we were
Oh,
saying,
no.
or
Like
the
what we're
quality
saying,
of
and if
like
it's
the
interesting enough for
microphones and the
people to actually
recordings.
download it, and like, is there enough pull factor? You know?
So interesting, because this comes right down to like, let's shift for a sec. Like, what did we learn from this experiment? The biggest thing about this experiment in this podcast is being vulnerable and putting ourselves out there and telling real stories about ourselves. And so we could have done this experiment not in a public format and just met once a week as friends and had a cup of tea, because we are friends, and said, let's do this thing where this ritual once a week where we talk about our regrets together and give each other feedback. We could have done it in a private format and met once a week at a cafe, but we decided to do it in a public format, which adds like another layer of vulnerability. But it's interesting because I've been the one editing them. So I've been listening to the episodes a lot more than you have. Yeah. Little secret here, everybody. Shadoe doesn't like listening to herself. So I'm trying to convince her to listen to the podcast more, because as I'm editing them and listening to them, I'm like, wow, I think this is really good stuff. Like it's really good, like meat and potato stuff that can create some really good change in people's lives as we're leading by example. So it's funny because you're worried that what you're saying isn't valuable, but whenever I'm listening to the editing, I'm always like, Shadoe has so much insight. Like, this is so great. And then there's times I'm like, oh, I'm really proud of myself that I said that, because I'm not thinking that right now. But so in terms of the content, I'm really proud of it. And I think that it has the potential to help people feel not alone, because I think people have these thoughts inside their head and in their inner monologues, and we all think that we're the way we think. Nobody else in the world thinks the way I think about myself inside my head, but we all do. We're all hard on ourselves inside our head. We all have that like inner monologue or inner critic or whatever it is, and we all have similar fears and guilts and regrets and shames, or we all feel it because our biocomputer, that is our brain, is in general created the same for most humans. Like, we have an amygdala that produces fear. We have other like the prefrontal cortex that tells us our sense of consequence. Like, we all have these parts in general, unless there's brain damage or whatever. We have these parts of our brains that have been pre-programmed to work that way, the way an elbows works to bend in a certain direction and our fingers work to bend. Like, there's a reason that these emotions exist, and what can we do with them and learn from them. But the thing is that we all think the way we feel emotions, nobody else does, but we don't think, well, my elbow bends differently than that person's elbow, because it's such a personal thing. But the thing is, the more we talk about it and the more we're open and vulnerable, we connect to more human beings more, because we realize that we have so much more in common, especially with our emotions and our internal thoughts. And then we can start to release judgment, right? But nobody judges me more than I judge myself. Right? So it's really interesting that I think that here's an example of like two different sides of the coin. I'm like so proud of like the content. I think it's awesome.
I'm not necessarily questioning the content. I do really like it. I think we've done something really great here that we would really like, and that people who are into the same things we're into would be into it. I guess what I'm more concerned about is, did we give people a homework assignment? right? Like I want people to come to us and feel lighter. And I worry that like either the way we're marketing it or the product itself, it's making people feel heavier. You know what I mean? And like that would be, if that is happening, that would be a regret I have about like making people almost like listen to me. And so it's not just that I don't like listening to my own voice. I don't like listening to podcasts at all. Like, and I'm glad that you like, I'm glad that you kind of like didn't bring that
everybody,
up
this
there
was
in
my
that
idea.
moment,
I
but
pulled
like,
Shadoe into it.
It's very difficult for me to pay attention to a podcast. So the fact that I'm asking people to pay attention to me has its own set of like expectations and weirdness and like all that kind of like ick factor around it. But you know, like I just, yeah. So it's like, yeah, go for it.
I'm gonna ask you a hard question. Do you think your voice and
Just
what you have to say is
certain
valuable?
people, maybe. Oh,
Do you
I'm
think
actually a
it's
very
valuable to
valuable person to
strangers?
strangers, but it's usually that first
Okay, good.
impression, right? Like I can make a stranger feel welcomed in a space. I can make a stranger feel heard on a bus. Like that's something I'm very, very good at. Right.
That's about them, though. That's not about what you
Right.
have to say. That's about how you're making them feel. Do you believe that what you have to say, that what you bring to the world is of value to strangers? You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer. I think it's an important question for everybody that's listening to hear, because I think we talked about this on the podcast, did we? About the 6 emotional needs. So I've talked about, have I?
I don't know. Let's
Well,
go back into
I'll
it.
do a little blurb here, everyone.
Yeah.
I teach this in my mindfulness classes that I teach in with my life coaching clients. So there's 5 basic physiological needs, which I think we talked about this in one of the episodes. The brain can't focus on anything if your basic physiological needs aren't met. So your basic physiological needs are, am I hydrated or overhydrated? Like you can't focus on anything if you have to pee. Have you ever tried to focus on something and you have to pee? You can't. You have to meet that physiological need. You have to pee. Or if your lips are chapped and your mouth is dry, like I can't focus on anything. My lips are chapped. Right. So there's hydration, there's food. Am I hungry? There's sleep. Am I so tired I can't focus? And then the other 2 are clothing or body temperature. Like if you're too hot or too cold, it's really hard to focus on something. And then the last one is shelter. And shelter is about feeling safe. Because if you don't feel safe in your environment, it doesn't mean you're in a house. Like you could be outside somewhere too. But like if you don't feel safe in your physical space, then you're in fight, flight, or freeze. Right. And you can't. So if you meet all of your 5 physiological needs, the brain's able to focus on the deeper work, which is what we're doing in this podcast, is like our regret, our shame, our guilt, our emotions, our personal growth, all those kinds of things. But in order to feel fulfilled and satisfied as a human being, after you've met your 5 physiological needs, there's 6 emotional needs.
Okay.
And many of us don't have them balanced, or they don't have to be perfectly balanced, right? Like 10% to this one, 10% to this one, but we need to meet them. We need to take action on them and participate in them. So let me see if I can remember this with my memory without pulling it up. The first one is certainty. So you need to feel sure and certain of something. That helps the brain feel safe. So that kind of goes along with our physiological needs, because the brain's like number one thing is to feel safe. If it doesn't feel safe and in control, it can't participate in anything extra. So there's certainty, right? So like I'm certain that I can feel good by getting a hug from my husband. That's going to make me feel good. I'm certain that I can feel pleasure. I'm certain that I can feel pain, and I'm certain. And if you can't think of anything you're certain of, like I am like certain that 1 + 1 = 2. Right? Like there's things in my life that I'm sure of, that are for sure, that I can control, that I feel safe. Right? The second one is uncertainty. It's the opposite. I call it variety or diversity. We need variety or diversity. We need novelty. Like, ooh, that's fun. Like, ooh, that's a surprise. Like a surprise, or like novelty, right? Then we need challenge and growth. Then we need, I think I've got them all, and then I'll look them up after and put them in the show notes, everybody. Then we need to feel important. And feeling important is different from feeling love. So the next one is we need to feel loved. So we need to feel important and valued. So like I'm a leader in a community and my community members value my leadership, or like my coworkers at work really value the work I'm doing. That's different from feeling love and connection, right? Do you see the difference between importance and love? We need to feel important and unique. And then the fifth one is we need to feel love and connection and bond. So that could be you and Gertie, your dog, makes you feel love. Like Olivia, my cat, makes me feel love and connection. My friends make me feel, my husband does, of course, right? Like we need to feel love and connection and bond and part of a community. And here's the sixth one that a lot of people leave out. We need to be of service. We need to give. We need to give and receive, and we need to be of service. And that being of service makes us feel value. And so I'm just going to call you out a little bit here because I love you. You're saying, you know, I'm really good on a bus to make, or in a thing to make other people feel comfortable. There's kind of two types of being of service, right? Like there's being of service about the top level things, like here, have my seat. Let me ask you a question about yourself. And then there's being of service that's actually what I believe we're doing with this podcast is really giving of ourselves in a vulnerable and open way. Here is my voice, and here's my experience. And by sharing my experience, my hope is that it is of service to our listeners, that they will have an aha moment or relate to it or not feel alone. But that's a very deep being of service versus I'm going to go volunteer at a pet shelter. Both of them are being of service and both work. But that deeper being of service, that deeper giving of ourselves. I had a friend once that was an alcoholic and went to Alcoholics Anonymous. She said, sometimes I go to the meeting to give. Sometimes I go to the meeting to get support. But I also go to the meetings when I don't need support because I'm going to the meetings to give. So, sometimes you go to give and sometimes you go to get. Right. So it's really hard to find that deep level being of service because we have to feel the other emotional needs first. We have to feel valued and important. We have to feel loved, and we have to embrace uncertainty, because when we're being vulnerable and actually giving our opinions and using our voice and giving of our like being of who we are, that's uncertain. But I value what you have to say, and I'll be consistent, persistent, and repetitive in telling you that, Shadoe, until your brain hears it.
No, it's good because even I just finished a therapy session. It was 6 sessions, and she can't see me anymore. It's very sad. But like she said that too as we were like leaving, and it was kind of like she's like, I think you're very insightful and this and that and all this like really nice stuff. And I was like, yeah, but you have to say that. Like you're
but
a
is that a defense mechanism to say like, but you have to say that?
I think, well, and she said, no, like you need to know that I don't say this to every client. You are doing the work. You are like really trying to change some really deep habits. And, you know, it was nice to hear, but I still struggle to think that anything I have to say is more insightful than other people who, I don't know, like both people who have platforms and people who don't. Like I don't see myself as any.
I think I've worked really hard on it, but I used to be in the place that you are, and I'm not perfect. I don't like 100% believe that everything I have to say. Like I have days where I'm like, I have no worth and no value. I think we all do, and I certainly do in the winter time. I've talked about this on the podcast that I have seasonal affective disorder, and I certainly struggle. It's something I've worked on a lot is believing. And you've probably, if you go back, like for example, in the episode where I talk about like the coaching and bullying episode where I talk about where the coach told me not to be bitchy. I mean, that made me believe that my voice didn't matter. And everything I do in my sport has to do with my voice.
Right.
Like I'm a rowing coxswain, like I'm using my
Yeah.
voice, right? So it's something we all struggle with. I think I've put a lot of work into believing it, but part of believing it is accepting the feedback that I get
Right.
and not blocking it, right? So thank you is a sentence and no is a sentence, right? So again, I'm going to use your example again because I love you, but like your therapist was like, you're really insightful. I love you saying, you're like, but you have to say that to everybody. That's blocking it.
Right.
Right. You could, so I did a lot of work on like receiving it and not blocking it when a compliment comes. Like somebody gives me a compliment, you just say thank you. You don't have to say thank you, but, and give all the reasons why it's not true. You just say thank you and receive it. And that can be really helpful. But it took me like years of therapy and years of work to be able to accept the compliment when it comes in, and not only accept it, but absorb it into like my being, and to help me feel that my voice and my opinions and my experience matter. And I think, again, feminist Victoria coming at everybody, I think women block more than men.
Right.
We've been trained to think that we're not as important and not worthy, just in society in general, and we block it. We block receiving love. But what does that do for us? It actually blocks the emotional needs of feeling important and unique, and it also blocks and prevents filling the emotional need of feeling connected and bonded, because that makes us feel worthy. So by doing that, we're actually preventing ourselves from fulfilling 2 of the 6 emotional needs, almost 3. Because by doing that too, we're also saying, well, I can't be of service because I'm not important. So just by blocking a compliment, you're actually blocking 3 of, you're preventing yourself from meeting 3 of your basic emotional needs.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that too? I had so many things to say as you started talking, and I've already changed my mind by the time you were done. So
because my voice matters, Shadoe.
Yes, I know. I was thinking about the idea that, like, I think part of it is not just that we're socialized to think that what we say isn't important, but we're socialized to give compliments. So even sometimes when we don't necessarily believe it, we might compliment someone's hair or someone's like outer thing, or tell someone that they're so nice or so interesting, but like we know we're lying. So then how do we accept a compliment from someone who might also be lying?
We don't give compliments unless we mean them. So then we're training ourselves. We're training ourselves to do it. And then subconsciously, by participating in that action, attitude, or behavior, the subconscious brain is all about actions, attitudes, and behaviors. We start to believe the compliments we're giving. And then the other side of that coin is that our subconscious brain will stop that pattern in your brain where you automatically question when someone gives you a compliment. You have to stop the pattern with an action. And the action is, we only give compliments when we need them. And your therapist did exactly that.
Right.
She said to you, I think you're insightful. I love hearing your opinions, what you have to say. And you said, you have to say that. And she said, no, I don't, because she's telling you in the way, in her actions, attitudes, and behaviors in life, she only gives compliments when she means them. She told you that. Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't mean that, like, you can always find a compliment about someone.
Right.
You can always find one that you mean. If someone's wearing a purple shirt, we all know purple's my power color, everyone, and I love purple. Like, I'm not lying when I say, oh, I really like your purple shirt. Yeah. Right? Like, you can always find a compliment about someone that you're not lying. They don't have to, they can be surface level compliments or they can be deep compliments. But when you're giving the deep compliments, those are the ones that matter. So make sure you believe them. If not, give a surface level compliment. That's still the truth, but go for the surface level one. I love your eye makeup. I love your shirt. I love your hair today. Right? Versus, I really love like what you have to say on the topic of like dogs. Yeah, or, I don't know, honestly,
like Victoria, the compliment I hear most often, and I always rebuff it, is, I like the way your brain works. It's so interesting. I said that to you. And you've said that to me. Everyone I've worked for has said it to me. Anybody I've had as a client with my business has said it to me. And to me, it's just like, bizarre. I'm like, how do you even come up with a compliment like that? Because like
they're giving you a deep level compliment that
yeah,
they truly believe, because that is not a surface level compliment
no,
you would give to someone.
exactly. And
So
I'm
you should
like,
believe it.
oh, but it's just, to me, it just seems so, it seems to me like someone's trying to butter me up and not like, and I guess that's nice. I guess that is nice and I should just accept it as nice. But yeah, it's tough for me to not, it's tough for me to hear that compliment.
I'm going to put something in your parking
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah,
Sorry,
for
finish your
sure.
thought. I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
no,
you.
no, 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 no. I would just be rambling anyway. So
Maybe for a future episode, as you're writing out your regrets for season 2, is um or that we could explore, is why do you think people are always going to take advantage of you and are buttering you up? Where does that
it's
come
not that I
from?
think they no, actually it's totally the opposite, Victoria. I actually think it's not that someone's going to take advantage of me. It's that I leak sadness. I bring my sadness everywhere. Everyone knows about it. Everyone like has to experience it sometimes. So I think they're saying that just to get some of that sadness back, or like to make me feel better. Like you know what I mean? It's not
Oh,
that they're
you
gonna,
think it's that they're just like, I think I get what you're saying.
yeah.
That they don't mean it, that they're just trying to make you feel bad. It's not minimizing, but it's like they're just trying
No.
to like build you up in some way.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, I appreciate it. I see the intention. It's nice. But the impact to me is that I'm always like, what? My brain's just normal. Or like it's not normal because I'm not normal, and normal's its own
You're
concept.
neurodivergent. I'm
I am
neurodivergent
neurodivergent, but at
too.
the same
Yeah.
time, like I don't know, like every once in a while someone will be like, that's brilliant. And I'll be like, it's not. It's the logical next step here.
Okay,
Like
so okay, can I give you like a metaphor?
yeah,
Analogy, maybe not a metaphor, I don't know.
sure.
Okay. Again, like this is why I think this podcast is being of service, because we're helping people know our inner thoughts, and to know that if you're having the same inner thoughts, most of us actually think the exact same inner thoughts,
Right.
but we all think that we don't. We all think that we're unique in that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so but what you're saying is that's what you think people
Right.
are doing to you, or you think, you're saying my brain's not interesting, that's just the logical way, that's common sense, right? I don't think there's any such thing as common sense, right? So for example, let's say, I mean, in our culture, most of our cultures, or in my culture, you take your shoes off at the door. You go to someone's house, you take your shoes off at the door. You get into your own house, you take your shoes off at the door, right? So you invite a friend over for the first time to your house. They come to your house, they don't take their shoes off at the door, and they walk around your house. And in your head, what are you thinking? Why the F didn't you take your shoes off at the door? And you're like, there's dirt in my house now.
Right.
Like, what kind of person does that? Right? Like you start like judging, being like, what the F, right?
Right.
Because that's common sense for you. But maybe they come from a culture. For example, my nephew and my sister and brother-in-law were just visiting from Australia. Okay. In Australia, you don't take your shoes off at the door, or you take your shoes off at the door and you have another pair of shoes that you put on.
House shoes.
Or you just wear your shoes. You don't want to step on a spider or something else that could sting you, right? Or there's lizards in your house or whatever, right? Like, and there's not a lot of dirt because it's like dry and sunny there. So we were like constantly reminding my nephew, like in Canada, you take your shoes off at the door. Does that make my nephew a bad person? Does that make his brain different because he doesn't think the way that I think? Because does that mean that like my logic is better than his logic? So, you know what I'm saying? So when people are giving you a compliment that your brain is awesome, you're assuming that they have the exact same logic as you, or the same cultural background or understandings or societal understandings. So when people give you a compliment, it's because they actually are valuing your brain, because your brain you do bring perspective to them in ways that they have a different cultural or societal or conditioned set of logics than you do, which does make your brain interesting and valuable.
Thank you, Victoria. I this is just a total tangent on the shoe question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I actually feel opposite. I will take off my shoes at someone's house and I will put socks on, especially in the summer. Like I'll take off my sandals and put on a pair of socks because like I don't want my gross TTC feet in their house. But if someone comes to my house, I never make them take their shoes off. In fact, I encourage them to keep their shoes on.
Interesting.
Because I'm not a good housekeeper, because my floor could have little bits of Gertie treats on them. There could be something broken that I didn't clean up 100%. Anything like that. Like I'd rather than bring their dirt in to celebrate with my dirt.
Okay, so I will never find a better analogy for you, a better metaphor analogy.
It's a good one.
But that's really interesting because that's your frame of reference.
Yeah.
And it's different.
It depends, and it's not like it came from either of my parents. Like my parents are take your shoes off people when they get home. When I didn't live in a condo, I was the same way. But there's also another factor. I now wear house shoes working from home because it makes me feel on. You know what I mean? Like to be barefoot or even with socks or even with slippers on, I'm lounging. I'm home. I'm having a good time. And working from home should be comfortable, but there is kind of a line.
That's a super good strategy.
If I have my house shoes on, which, indoor shoes, we kind of grew up with that as kids, you took off your outdoor shoes, you put your indoor shoes on in school. And if you worked in offices, a lot of times in the winter, you would take off your boots and put on your cute little office appropriate shoes.
Yeah.
Wearing shoes at home has actually really helped me stay on task. But I get that for some people, for most people, having your shoes on at home is gross. So I just
tie your argument back to me about the shoes, tie the analogy back that you just made about your shoes to people giving you a compliment about your brain. How does that analogy work for you?
It's fine. I've really surrounded myself with really awesome, interesting people. So I also think that they're just trying to find ways to continue to be awesome, generous people. And so it's not that I question the compliment. The compliment's really nice. But if I think back to these 6 emotional needs that you brought up, it does help me feel loved and connected. And then also the idea of by me blocking their compliment, I'm taking away their ability to be of service.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? And we've
giving
talked about
and receiving happens at the same time. It's a two-way street, giving and receiving.
And I don't like it when people rebuff my comments either. If I tell my husband, oh, hey, you look really good today, he'll be like, oh, ew, no, I'm not attractive. And I'll be like, shut up, you are attractive. But then I do the exact same thing back to him.
So you know that part, I don't know if it's Friends or what it is. It's I know that you know that you know that I know that I'm doing this. Right?
Yeah.
I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know.
Yeah.
Right? So it's almost the same giving and receiving. It just keeps overlapping in a good way. They're giving me the compliment. I'm receiving it. But by receiving it, I'm also giving to them. Right? So I know that they're giving me the compliment. So I'm giving and receiving, and I'm giving and receiving. Right? You're giving and receiving and giving and receiving by not rebuffing it. You're receiving it. You're giving to them. Right? You're giving to them in terms of acknowledging that their feelings are important too. And then they're giving it back to you in energy, and you're giving it back to them in energy too, right? It's it's happening 4 times.
I'm stifling a giggle about that too, because that's also a Friends reference.
Yeah.
When Joey writes the really terrible wedding speech. Oh, he's all talking about when they give and they receive and they receive and they give.
But it's true. So let me ground us here for a sec.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we just went off on a really beautiful tangent, but I think it answers the question. Yeah. What have we learned from this experiment of talking about our regrets once a week together? Is it working, and what has it changed for us? So I think it's opened us up to be able to have these conversations like we're having
Mm.
right now, and to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do that with other people in our lives as well. And to feel, for me, to feel less shame about my regrets too. What about you? Like,
Yeah.
what has worked? And like, there were some stories in season one that I've never said out loud, like the zoo
Right.
story in the finale. I've never told anybody how I feel about that
Right.
memory.
Right.
Um, what about you?
I think it really helped clear some space. Like I think a lot of the stories we talked about, I was thinking about some of these things weekly, daily, monthly. Like they
Mhm.
were always coming up. Like part of my ADHD is that I'm constantly rehearsing future conversations and replaying past conversations and how I would do them differently. So I think doing this podcast has almost made it like, again, bringing it back to the hypocrite inside of me, it's made it like easier and harder, because it makes it easier to talk about things that I feel comfortable with. But then it gets harder because I start seeking, okay, what other stories, what other regrets can I start thinking about all the time? As opposed to like releasing the idea of
Mm.
shame at all. I've relieved some of my like tiny shames. So now I can start thinking about my bigger shames all the fucking time. So
Maybe
that
that's what we dive into in season
maybe.
two, is as we're prepping to record season two, everybody, is
Mm-hmm.
maybe we'll shift a little bit of the structure, or maybe we will get into some deeper things, or
Mm-hmm.
because this is an experiment as a podcast, but also experiment in our lives, everybody.
Oh
Like, this
yeah.
is changing our lives. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's when we participate and we find a ritual, for lack of a better word, or a structure or a schedule or whatever word you want to use, that has to do with personal growth, I believe, anyways. We need to have these like sets and balances the same way we have sets and balances with food or
Mm-hmm.
physical activity or our health and getting blood tests or whatever, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
when we get into this, the ritual, like, it actually changes our brain in the way that
Mm-hmm.
our programming works, and it starts to, I have found, affect naturally, because our subconscious brain is always guiding us,
Mm-hmm.
um, actions, attitudes, and behaviors. And I notice, like, oh, I have a different reaction to this thing than I would, because
Right.
I can almost preemptively think, this might be something I'm going to regret. Is it worth regretting? Can I let it go right
Mm-hmm.
now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
in the moment.
Right.
And that's how the experiment of doing this is kind of working for me. It's giving me like foresight, is that the right word? Like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the future in real time as it's
Mm-hmm.
happening now, and able to almost like relieve a little bit of the regret that I might feel in the future around something when it's
Mm-hmm.
happening in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if we weren't meeting on a regular basis and doing this discussion together, I would, because, so you're open about ADHD, I'm open about, I'm a person living with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It is like a anxiety preventative strategy almost,
Right.
by doing the work, if that makes sense. Like, it helps me
Mm-hmm.
prevent anxiety in the moment by thinking, like, if I was telling the story on the Let's Relieve Regret podcast
Right.
later, how much regret am I going to feel about this? Or can I just release this regret right now? The other thing that
Mm-hmm.
I do in my life, which we've talked about before, and my company, my Recreo, does, is every Friday I have a gathering and I run a letting go meditation, and we have a chat about what we want to let go of for that week. And then I run like a 15-20 minute visualization meditation. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. It's like, even though I'm giving it, I'm not doing the meditation, I'm guiding it. It's part of my like ritual now, or part of my structure or schedule, that really helps me. So that, and this podcast is where I get to do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I run my meditation, it's where I get to do it and be of service. But I'm getting out of this podcast, I think, what a lot of people are getting out of that meditation class that I run. But it has to be consistent, persistent, and repetitive in order for it to
Mm-hmm.
work, because the brain, especially when you have a neurodivergent brain like ADHD or anxiety or whatever, actually needs that consistent, persistent repetition of the programming or of the
Mm-hmm.
scheduling to start to reframe how it's working in the subconscious. So the answer to that big question is, what have we learned for me, what have I learned from the experiment and is it working? Is yes, it's working. And I'm learning that by doing these personal growth things, my actions, attitudes, and behaviors are coming more naturally to me in a kinder way out of the programming that's happening in my brain because of it, the releasing and letting go that's happening. That's my answer to the question.
Yeah, I mean, my answer too, like I'm noticing that like I wouldn't say it's bad that I want to take on bigger challenges. Like that's just how I'm wired. Like I've done it now, I want to do more exciting, almost scary shares in season 2.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
But like again, if it's just vanity, if it's just us and we're just doing it, like that's great. So this comes back to like my regrets around the production of it, is that like I do like it. I do think people will get a lot of value out of it, but we have to make sure we're marketing it in a way that people see the value. Like I think I'm still doing this like candy coated, glossy, like, come listen to our regrets. It's not scary.
So can we make a commitment right now, maybe?
Yeah.
That
where like,
we still need a balance and diversity. There's some fun things. I mean, my favorite episode from season 1 was the boobs episode. Thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Because we have to laugh about things in life too. Like we have to like take things with a grain of salt too. But maybe we can make a commitment that we do have some deeper ones this season.
Yeah, and
or maybe talk about some personal traumas or some stuff like that, and really have a couple episodes where we actually dive deep and we lay it all out there, and we have faith that our listeners are going to support us and that we're going to support each other.
Yeah, and also that our listeners like know what they're getting into. I think that a big part of it for me is like we even talked about, oh well, maybe next season the episodes should be shorter, and I think for me that's because I want it to be easily digestible, but we're not dealing with easily digestible things, right? So like it's good that it's a little bit tougher to manage, but I think we have to put that amount of work into our marketing as well.
We have to trust that our listeners are smart. I trust that our listeners are smart, and that if they want to spend an hour and a half listening to us dive into something deep, that it's going to interest them. And we've just come full circle here. Like what I have to say, what you have to say is valuable. Our life experiences are valuable. Everybody's life experiences are valuable to listen and hear each other, and to be able to live more freely, less judgment. That's how we connect. That's like the 4th or 5th or 3rd emotional we'll
have to make like a cute
and bonding and understanding, right?
Yeah. My brain is still like, let's make a cute little infographic with those 6 emotions.
Sure, we will, everyone. We'll put it up.
But like,
somewhere.
why does it have to be cute?
Not cute. Let's just make an infographic with the 6 emotional needs.
Yeah. So no, that's funny. I will say one of the other things that we were experimenting with in the podcast was this idea of always starting with a cause for applause. And we didn't start this episode with that.
We didn't. We just got right into it.
Yeah.
Because we were like, this episode doesn't have structure. It's just us talking.
Exactly.
But are you feeling the need for some cause for applauses?
No, it's not even that. It's just that like something I have learned from it is that like I now do the cause for applause at the start of other meetings I'm running. And sometimes I get like the eye roll and people will be like, oh, I don't even have one for this week. Why are we even doing this? Like, let's just get into the meeting. But every single time we actually do the cause for applause before we get into the meeting goes better. And if I even try, like sometimes I do skip it because like people don't want to do it. And I'll be like, okay, well, my cause for applause is that I'm happy we're all here today, you know, and then at least from there, like there's a little bit of positivity to start the meeting. And again, like the same thing I was just talking about where like, I want everything to just be positive. I want people to feel happy when they're done. And sometimes the work isn't that. Like sometimes the reason we're having a meeting is something got fucked up and that's why we're meeting about it. But I'm still like, let's have a cause for applause. But
I think,
I don't know.
I love the wording cause for applause too, because I think it's important to celebrate the small things. Science and studies actually tell us that when we celebrate the small things and when we celebrate the big things in life, the brain has the exact same reaction. So it's equally as important to celebrate the small things. And that's how I see the cause for applause.
Yeah.
But I also think like what we're doing right now is demonstrating, like we're basically doing a check-in and a debrief all in one.
Mm-hmm.
Going into a meeting, maybe you call it a check-in instead of a cause for applause, but it's what
Oh,
it
but I like
really
the
is
rhyme.
what it really is about is checking in, like connecting
Right.
to myself as an individual. If I can give myself a small celebration, it's going to give me a hit of serotonin and dopamine in my brain. And it's also going to give a hit of serotonin and serotonin actually, to the people in the meeting that are listening to it too, because it can change their mindset and help them think about something in that way too. But you're
Mm-hmm.
right. And that's a theme for the second season too, or we should try to be more vulnerable and more open and acknowledge that things are uncomfortable and can be hard, and it's okay to talk
Mm-hmm.
about that too, and not
Yeah.
everything needs to be toxic positivity. I
Oh,
don't
for
think
sure.
cause for applause is toxic positivity. I
No,
think it's a good
no.
habit.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I think the process, because we've tried very hard to use the same strategies in every episode and to have that structure, which I love,
Mm-hmm.
um, is feedback or being heard.
Right.
I use it in my life all the time,
Good.
right? Like,
Yeah.
do you want some feedback or did you just want to be heard and cared for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I struggle with it still. I want to jump into that unsolicited advice
Mm-hmm.
right away, all the time. And that's something I've been working on a lot in the last few years, to the point where someone straight up asked me the other day. I was talking to them about something and I was letting them talk, and I never asked if they wanted feedback or advice. I just let them talk. And then they were like, "Can you give me some advice? Like, I came to you because you give advice."
Well, that's fantastic though,
And
because
it
you
was
gave
really,
them
yeah,
the space to ask without
yeah,
assuming that that's what they
totally.
wanted. You
And it
gave them
felt
the space to
awesome.
be heard and
Yeah,
then the space to ask, and then you gave it. I
yeah.
think that's a massive cause
Oh,
for
it was
applause.
so awesome. I was
Yeah.
like, right, this could be this way.
It
um,
builds your
yeah,
confidence too, because then
yeah.
you're actually hearing somebody say to you, I value your advice and what you're saying.
Hmm.
So you're giving and receiving, receiving and then giving,
Yeah. But
right?
then I see, and then I again bring it back to this idea where, like, I need to practice more stuff in my day to day to retrain my subconscious, because I hate asking for the advice. Like, I wish
Oh,
people would just, like, if I'm complaining about something, sometimes sure I just want to be heard, but most of the time I am waiting for someone to be like, well, I can help you with this, or I can help you with that. But like, Ben will do this sometimes too, where like he'll wait and he'll listen to me, and then like he'll be like, do you want help? And I'll be like, no. Because like this like inner critic is like, no, I don't want help, get out of my face. But I do want the help.
does it make
I
you,
just like
why?
can't ask for it.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know why.
Does
I
it mean
really,
you're a failure if you ask for help?
no, I don't know what it is. It's just this really weird, like,
Is it ego?
it's ego. It's a little tiny rebel. It's like this little, like,
Is it anger?
annoying trait. Maybe it's anger. It's just like this weird, annoying trait where, like, if I see someone struggling, I just jump up and help them. I don't even like wait for, like, you know,
Is it
but
believing that you
yeah.
don't deserve help?
No, it's just honest. Like, it's like this really annoying gum on the shoe of my subconscious.
Mm.
Like, if
It's
people
some conditioning or
like,
programming from somewhere. You actually don't have to
yeah,
know why or where or all your conditioning or programming. I
yeah,
love the way you're describing. You're like, this is this thing that I have. I don't know where it comes from, but I want to work
yeah,
on it.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it's because I always offer unsolicited help. So I assume other people are going to offer unsolicited help. And when they just say, like, oh, I hear you, or whatever, I'm almost like, ew, like, don't do that. Like, give me the
Then
solution
ask for
here.
it though. Right? Like by
But
saying,
that's
I hear
hard.
you,
That's
that's
really
kind of the
difficult for
pattern we're
me.
in. Is like we're
Yeah.
saying, I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
So then either we can say, do you want advice or do you
Yeah.
want feedback? Or if we just
Mm-hmm.
say, I hear you, the other person can also still ask for feedback or
Oh,
advice,
yeah.
right? This is
Yeah.
the skill we're kind of teaching by example here. So, okay, so we're kind of in a cause for applause section here, but like, what did we
Mm-hmm.
learn is like, I think like the biggest keys from like this kind of structure that we've designed in the podcast is that causes for applauses are important, and that the feedback, like you want feedback because you want to be heard, is like a really great skill in interpersonal relationships and in
Huge.
relationships with yourself. And I'm going to say the third thing, cause for applause or structure that we've learned or done or whatever, what's happened with the thing, is I think it's really cool to get to a point to say, hey, I actually want to be more vulnerable, and I'm actually ready to open myself up to the world in a deeper way, because we can always, I mean, I hate this analogy because I'm allergic to onions, but we can always peel back more layers on the onion. I need to find another one because I can't eat onions. But you know what I mean? Like, we can always go deeper.
Yeah.
We can always find another layer. And I'm really proud of both of us for saying in season 2, we're ready to go into another layer.
Oh, yeah.
To go a little bit deeper, and to know that going deeper is being of service and filling that emotional need for us. But also, when we're of service, it fills that emotional need for us. And the people that we're being of service to, it fills the emotional need of growth and diversity and uncertainty for them. So by doing it, you're actually filling a need for yourself and filling a need for the people that you're being of service to.
Right.
With our podcast in particular. That's what I think.
I think that's great.
So, do you have a cause for applause? Should we finish off with just some causes for applauses? I mean, I just said 3, I think, but just in general,
right.
cause for applause.
I'm glad we did this because when we talked about doing like an episode where we talked about our regrets from season 1, all of mine were production based, or like mistakes I made in the podcast. Like, I know there's an episode where I talk about the acronym THINK. And I say, it's true, it's honest, it's like blah, blah, blah. But the H isn't honest, it's helpful.
Oh, okay.
And it would have changed that entire
corner.
conversation. Yeah. But at the same time, like, is it that big of a deal? No, because like I'm getting really bogged down by these nitpicky details that I can then hyper focus on and say, okay, these are the regrets I have, as opposed to like the regrets of not getting deeper, not sharing more, not waiting my turn. Like, those are real things that I might not want to face. So I focus on these like again, tactile, like these are the mistakes we made, these because they're mistakes, they're regrets. So my cause for applause is that I'm really happy we had this session, that I can even look at it differently than I was planning to. So my cause for applause is this episode, weirdly.
Yay! Awesome. I'm glad we had this session too. I also think, going along with the theme that just happened naturally anyways, is I think it's important for us to have like an episode maybe in between every season where it is just you and I talking and debriefing. And hopefully you enjoyed listening to it, listeners. And if there's any questions that we asked in the episode, or you want to give us feedback, we are learning that we like feedback. So give us feedback and let us know what parts that you like and how you feel about cause for applause, or any kind of feedback. I think we've asked for it a couple times in this episode. When I go back and listen to it and edit it, I'll find it. And I don't really edit much, actually. Like, all of our episodes are really just free flow. Like, I'm not editing a lot out at all. I might be editing out some ums and some ahs and some like spaces of dead sound, but I'm not really editing out much in our episodes at all. Like, it really is just authentic and real Shadoe and Victoria. I'm proud of that. That might be my cause for applause, is that it's not highly edited and glossy and clean and whatever. This is what it is, and we're really putting it out there, and I'm proud of us, and I think we can go deeper into that layer of putting it out there in season 2.
Great. Are we gonna continue with the way we end the episodes?
Let's do it. Should we do our 3 breaths? And maybe it'll be 3 different breaths in season 2. I don't know. Let us know, everyone. You can email us, you can message us on Instagram, you can put a post, whatever you want to get in contact with us. It's all in the episode notes, but we really do value feedback. Yeah, so if you like the 3 breaths or you want them to be something different, or maybe I'll play around with different ones or keep them the same for season 2, we'll see. But why don't we end? Come on to the front edge of your seat, everybody. Put your feet flat on the floor, if it's safe to do so. If you're driving, please continue driving or pull over. But put your feet flat on the floor. The reason we put our feet flat on the floor, everyone, is it automatically tells our brain that we feel safe, that we feel grounded. When we feel our feet on the floor, that's gravity. That's the earth holding us in the palm of its hand. That's gravity that never letting us fly away. So just putting your feet flat on the floor, that ground is grounding, but that's where it comes from. It feels the emotional need of certainty. I know that the earth is always going to hold me in the palm of its hand, that gravity is never going to let me fly away. So it fills that need. So put your feet flat on the floor. And if you want, you can put one hand on your chest if you want. And let's do our 3 breaths of letting go, of release. On this first breath, breathe in. And as you breathe out, I release pressure and expectations. On the second breath, breathe in. As you breathe out, I relieve my regrets. My past does not define me. On this third breath, as you breathe out, I am excited to move forward. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for being a bug on the wall as Shadoe and I debrief. And thank you, Shadoe, for debriefing with me. I think debriefing is valuable. And I'm so excited to move forward into season 2.
Me too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
You're ridiculous.